Imagine waking up in a small, mud brick house as the sun rises over the Nile River. The sky is turning orange and you hear birds chirping in the reeds. It is hot in ancient Egypt, even early in the morning. Your family is already awake. Your mother is grinding grain to make bread for breakfast. Your father is getting ready to work in the fields. You are a child, but you still have chores to do. You might help sweep the floor, fetch water from a nearby well, or feed the goats. You don't mind the work, it means you're helping your family. After chores, if there is time, you might play with your friends. You play games like tug of war, leapfrog, or try to toss pebbles into clay pots. You have a doll made of cloth, and your brother has carved animals out of wood. Sometimes older children make little boats from reeds and float them in the river. Most people in ancient Egypt were farmers. They lived near the Nile because the land there was rich and good for growing food. Each year, the river flooded. When the water went down, it left dark soil behind. That soil helped crops grow. Farmers planted wheat, barley, onions, garlic, and flax. They used simple tools like wooden plows and sickles. They worked very hard in the hot sun. Men worked in the fields or helped build temples and tombs. Women took care of the home. They made bread, spun thread, and cared for the children. Children helped their parents. Some took care of animals like goats or ducks. Others helped in the fields. Children also played. They played games with sticks and balls. They had dolls made from clay or cloth. Most people in ancient Egypt did not go to school. Only the children of rich families went. Boys from rich families learned to read and write. They studied math, writing, and history. They used a kind of writing called hieroglyphs. These were picture symbols. They wrote on a paper called papyrus, which was made from a plant that grew near the river. Life was different for people who worked for the pharaoh. The pharaoh was the king of Egypt. He was the most powerful person in the land. People believed he was chosen by the gods. The pharaoh lived in a palace and wore fine clothes and gold jewelry. He gave orders to his officials who helped run the government. Priests were also important. They worked in temples and cared for the gods. People believed in many gods. There were gods for the sun, the sky, the river, and even cats. Every town had its own special god. Temples were quiet places where priests gave offerings, like bread or beer, to the gods. People came to temples to pray or ask for help. Egyptians believed in the afterlife. They thought life after death was like life on earth, but better. To prepare for the afterlife, they buried people with things they might need. Rich people were buried with food, clothes, jewelry, and even games. Some people were mummified. This meant their bodies were carefully wrapped and dried out to stay preserved. They believed the soul needed the body in the next life. Most Egyptians wore simple clothes made of linen. Men wore short skirts called kilts. Women wore long dresses. Both men and women wore jewelry. Rich people wore gold and silver. Poor people wore jewelry made from shells or beads. Everyone tried to stay clean. They washed often and used scented oils to smell nice. Food was simple but tasty. People ate bread, onions, beans, and fish. They drank water, beer, and sometimes wine. They cooked over small fires. Most people ate with their fingers. Meals were shared with family. Daily life was not easy. People worked hard and faced dangers like sickness, drought, or attacks. But they also had music, games, and stories. They painted on the walls of their tombs and carved statues. They loved beauty and believed deeply in their gods. This was life in ancient Egypt. Hot days, hard work, strong families, and a deep respect for nature and the gods. In a quiet, cool room deep inside an ancient stone tomb, there lies a long wooden box. Inside that box is a mummy, a person who lived thousands of years ago. Their face is wrapped in cloth. Their hands are crossed. Around them are treasures, food, and little statues. This is not a scary mummy from a movie. This is a real person from ancient Egypt. Long ago, Egyptians believed that mummifying a body helped a person live forever. A mummy is a body that has been preserved so it does not rot away. In ancient Egypt, making a mummy was a very careful and special process. The Egyptians believed in life after death. They believed that when a person died, their soul would go on a journey. If the soul found the body still safe and whole, it could return and live forever in the next world. That is why the body had to be protected. The process of making a mummy took about 70 days. First, the embalmers washed the body. Then they removed the organs, like the stomach, lungs, and liver. These were cleaned and placed in jars called canopic jars. Each jar had a lid shaped like the head of a god. The heart was sometimes kept in the body because the Egyptians believed it was the center of thinking and feeling. The brain, on the other hand, was usually thrown away. The embalmers used a hook to pull it out through the nose. Next, they dried the body using a special kind of salt called natron. This salt soaked up all the moisture so the body would not decay. After many days, the body was dried out and ready to be wrapped. The embalmers rubbed oils and perfumes onto the skin. Then they wrapped the body in long strips of linen cloth. Sometimes they used hundreds of feet of cloth. They placed amulets, small magical charms, between the layers. These were meant to protect the person on their journey to the afterlife. Finally, the wrapped mummy was placed in a coffin. Rich people had fancy coffins with bright colors and pictures of gods and symbols. Some coffins were shaped like the person's body and painted with their face. The coffin was then placed inside a tomb. A tomb was like a house for the dead. Inside the tomb, people placed food, clothes, jewelry, and even furniture. They believed the person would need these things in the next world. Mummification was mostly done for kings, queens, and rich or important people. Regular people were sometimes buried in simpler ways, but even they tried to preserve the body a little. The most famous mummies are from Egypt, but mummies have been found in other parts of the world too. In places like Peru and China, people also found ways to preserve bodies using dry air, cold, or other methods. One of the most famous mummies is King Tutankhamun, often called King Tut. He was a young pharaoh who ruled Egypt more than 3,000 years ago. His tomb was discovered in 1922 by an archaeologist named Howard Carter. Inside, they found amazing treasures, gold masks, chariots, jewelry, and statues. King Tut's mummy was still inside his coffin. His tomb helped the world learn more about ancient Egypt. For many years, people were curious about mummies, but did not always treat them with respect. In the 1800s, some people in Europe held mummy unwrapping parties, where they opened real mummies in front of a crowd. Today, scientists study mummies in careful and respectful ways. They use tools like X-rays and CT scans to look inside without opening them. This helps them learn about the person's age, health, and how they lived. Mummies can tell us many things. They show us what people looked like long ago. They teach us about medicine, religion, and daily life in ancient Egypt. Some mummies have even shown signs of diseases like arthritis or toothaches. Scientists can also study the linen wrappings and learn how cloth was made. Even the jars and tomb decorations give us clues about beliefs and traditions. Today you can see real mummies in museums all over the world. The Egyptian Museum in Cairo has many, including royal mummies. The British Museum in London and the Louvre in Paris also have mummy displays. When people look at a mummy, they are seeing a person from the distant past, a person who was loved, who lived a life, and who hoped to live forever. The ancient Egyptians believed that as long as someone remembered your name, you would never truly die. That is why they wrote names on tombs and coffins. That is why they made sure the body stayed safe. Mummies are not just old remains, they are reminders of a powerful hope, the hope that life can go on even after death. Imagine standing by the Nile River in ancient Egypt. The sun is hot, and tall green plants grow along the water's edge. These plants are called papyrus. They look like long stalks with flowers at the top, shaped like little umbrellas. But these plants were more than just pretty. They were used to make one of the most important inventions in history: papyrus paper. Papyrus was the first kind of paper used by humans. It helped people write down stories, laws, prayers, and letters. It helped keep records and share ideas. Without papyrus, we might not know as much about ancient Egypt today. The papyrus plant grew only in Egypt and a few nearby places. It needed warm weather and lots of water, so the Nile River was the perfect spot. The Egyptians used the plant in many ways. They used the roots for fuel, the stalks for making boats, mats, baskets, sandals, and ropes. But the most famous use was for making paper. To make papyrus paper, workers cut the tall stalks into thin strips. They peeled off the green outside and kept the soft white inside. Then they laid the strips side by side to form a row. On top of that, they added a second row of strips going the other way, like a crosshatch. After that, they pressed the layers together with a heavy stone or hammer and left them to dry. The sap inside the plant helped glue the layers together. Once the sheet was dry, they rubbed it smooth with a stone or shell. One sheet of papyrus could be glued to another to make long scrolls. Some scrolls were over 30 feet long. These scrolls could be rolled up and stored easily. Scribes, people trained to read and write, used brushes or reeds dipped in ink to write on the papyrus. They used black ink for writing and red ink for important words or headings. Papyrus was used for many things. It helped keep track of taxes, trade, and laws. It was used in schools, temples, and the royal court. Some papyrus scrolls had prayers or magic spells, others had stories or poems. One very famous set of scrolls was the Book of the Dead. It was a guide to the afterlife filled with spells to help people travel safely after death. Papyrus helped the Egyptian government run smoothly. It helped doctors write about medicine. It helped builders plan temples and tombs. Even regular people used it to write letters to friends or keep records of what they owned. Because papyrus was so useful, Egypt sold it to other lands like Greece and Rome. For many years, Egypt was the only place where papyrus grew. That made it very valuable. People from faraway places wanted it to make their own books and records. Over time, other kinds of writing material were invented. People in Asia made paper from tree bark and cloth. People in Europe wrote on animal skins called parchment. These new materials lasted longer and could be made in more places. Slowly, papyrus was used less and less. Still, many old papyrus scrolls have been found in tombs and buried in the dry desert. The hot, dry air helped keep them safe for thousands of years. Today, you can see real papyrus in museums. Scientists study them to learn more about ancient Egypt. They can read about laws, stories, and even jokes written over 3,000 years ago. Papyrus may look simple, but it helped build one of the world's greatest civilizations. It gave people a way to share ideas, save knowledge, and stay connected. It was the paper of the ancient world, and it all started with a plant by the river. Imagine walking through an ancient Egyptian temple. Incense fills the air, and golden light shines through small windows. On the stone walls, you see carvings of powerful women with crowns, wings, or animal heads. These are the goddesses of ancient Egypt. To the Egyptians, goddesses were just as important as gods. They were protectors, healers, creators, and rulers of nature, love, magic, and even war. People prayed to them for help with family, health, birth, and safety. The Egyptians believed in many gods and goddesses. This belief in many deities is called polytheism. Each goddess had a special role and a special power. Some were kind and loving, others were fierce and strong. Many were shown as women with animal features to show their powers, like lion heads for strength or wings for protection. Goddesses were deeply respected and often linked to both nature and family life. One of the most important goddesses was Isis. She was the goddess of magic, healing, motherhood, and protection. Isis was loved by all Egyptians. She was the wife of Osiris, the god of the afterlife, and the mother of Horus, the sky god. After Osiris was killed by his brother Set, Isis used her magic to bring him back to life. She was often shown with wings or with a throne symbol on her head. People believed Isis protected children, helped the sick, and listened to prayers. Her kindness and magic made her one of the most worshipped goddesses in all of Egypt. Another powerful goddess was Hathor, the goddess of love, joy, music, and dance. She was also the goddess of motherhood and helped welcome souls into the afterlife. Hathor was often shown with cow horns and a sun disk on her head. Sometimes she was shown as a cow or a woman with cow ears. People prayed to her for happiness, safe births, and comfort after death. Festivals in her honor were full of music and celebration. Sekhmet was very different. She was the goddess of war and destruction, but also of healing. Sekhmet had the head of a lion and the body of a woman. She was fierce and powerful, often called upon to protect the pharaoh in battle. According to myth, when people stopped respecting the gods, Sekhmet went on a rampage. Only after drinking a special potion that looked like blood did she calm down. Though feared, she was also respected and believed to cure disease and keep away evil. Bastet was another lioness goddess who became gentler over time. She began as a fierce protector, but later was seen more as a kind guardian of homes and families. Bastet had the head of a cat and was one of the most beloved goddesses. She watched over mothers and children and kept away bad spirits. People loved cats because they were sacred to Bastet. Families often kept cats in their homes and even made statues of them as offerings. Nut was the goddess of the sky. She was often shown as a giant woman stretching over the earth, her body covered in stars. Each night Nut swallowed the sun, and each morning she gave birth to it again. She was the mother of Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys. Nut watched over the world and was believed to protect the dead as they traveled to the afterlife. Nephthys, Nut's daughter, was a goddess of the night, mourning, and protection. She helped Isis in many stories and was part of the team that guarded the dead. She is often shown with a special crown made of her name in hieroglyphs. There were many more goddesses. Ma'at was the goddess of truth, order, and justice. She kept the universe balanced. In the afterlife, people's hearts were weighed against her feather of truth. If a heart was heavy with sin, it failed the test. Ma'at reminded people to live with honesty and fairness. Temples were built to honor goddesses, and some towns were named after them. People left offerings of bread, perfume, or jewelry at their statues. Women especially prayed to goddesses for strength, safe childbirth, and love. Even in daily life, goddesses were honored in stories, art, and prayers. The goddesses of ancient Egypt were not just symbols. They were seen as real forces who helped people in times of joy, danger, and sorrow. Whether fierce like Sekhmet, loving like Isis, or joyful like Hathor, they were a powerful part of Egyptian life. Imagine walking into a huge temple in ancient Egypt. The walls are covered with colorful paintings. You see tall figures with animal heads, wearing crowns and holding special symbols. These are the gods of ancient Egypt. The Egyptians believed these powerful beings controlled everything: sunlight, floods, farming, sickness, even death. The gods were part of their everyday life. The ancient Egyptians believed in many gods. This is called polytheism. Each god had a special job. Some ruled over nature, like the sun or river. Others protected people, judged the dead, or gave wisdom. Some gods looked like humans, but many had the heads of animals. This helped people tell them apart and remember what they were in charge of. One of the most important gods was Ra, the sun god. He was the king of the gods and brought light to the world. Egyptians believed Ra sailed across the sky each day in a boat. At night he traveled through the underworld, where he had to fight off a giant snake called a Apophis. If Ra won, the sun rose again. Ra had the head of a falcon and a glowing sun disk on top of his head. Since the sun gave life to the land, Ra was deeply respected. Another important god was Osiris. He was the god of the afterlife and ruled the land of the dead. Osiris was shown with green skin to represent new life, and he wore a white crown with feathers. He was once a great king who was killed by his brother Set. After his death, he became the ruler of the underworld. Egyptians believed Osiris welcomed good souls into the afterlife and judged them fairly. Horus, the sky god, was Osiris's son. He had the head of a falcon and sharp eyes. Egyptians believed Horus watched over the land and protected the pharaoh, who was thought to be the living form of Horus on earth. Horus is famous for fighting his uncle, Set, to avenge his father's death. After many battles, Horus became the protector of Egypt. Set, or Seth, was the god of chaos, storms, and violence. He brought confusion and disorder. Set was often shown with the head of a strange creature with a long snout and square ears. Even though he was feared, Set also had an important job. He helped Ra fight off the great snake Apophis during the sun's night journey. Anubis was the god of mummification and the guardian of tombs. He had the head of a black jackal. Since jackals were often seen around cemeteries, people believed Anubis protected the dead. He helped prepare bodies for the afterlife and guided souls through the underworld. Anubis also helped in the weighing of the heart, a test to see if a soul was pure enough to reach the afterlife. Thoth was the god of writing, knowledge, and wisdom. He had the head of an ibis bird. Thoth kept records of all things and was believed to have invented writing. In the afterlife, he wrote down the results of the heart-weighing test. Scribes and scholars prayed to Thoth for help with reading and learning. Hapi was the god of the Nile River and its yearly flood. Every year the Nile flooded and left rich soil behind. This helped crops grow and gave life to the land. People gave thanks to Hapi for this great gift. He was shown as a plump, happy figure with flowing water plants on his head. Another important god was Khnum. He was believed to have created humans on a potter's wheel from clay taken from the Nile. Khnum was also a god of the river and helped control the flow of water. He had the head of a ram and was worshipped in places where the Nile began to flood. Temples were built across Egypt to honor the gods. Inside, priests cared for statues of the gods, giving them offerings of food, drink, and incense. Only priests could go inside the temple's inner rooms. Ordinary people stayed outside, but still prayed, left gifts, and showed respect. Some families had small shrines at home with statues of their favorite gods. Each city in Egypt had its own special god. In Thebes, people worshipped Amun. In Memphis, they honored Ptah. Even though people across Egypt believed in many of the same gods, each place had its own traditions. The gods of ancient Egypt were not just stories, they were part of daily life. People prayed to them for health, safety, rain, or success in their work. They believed the gods were always watching, always listening, and always helping. That is why the gods were painted on tomb walls, carved into statues, and remembered for thousands of years. Imagine walking through a busy village in ancient Egypt. You see women baking bread, weaving cloth, and taking care of children. But you also see women selling goods in the market, working as priestesses, and even owning land. In ancient Egypt, women had many roles. They were mothers, workers, and sometimes even rulers. Egyptian women had more rights than many women in other ancient places. Most women in ancient Egypt were part of farming families. They worked hard every day. They made food, cleaned the house, and raised children. They also helped with farm work and took care of animals. Women made clothes by spinning flax into thread and weaving it into linen. They made beer, which was a common drink. They also made medicine using herbs. Women in ancient Egypt could own land and houses. They could buy and sell goods. If a woman's husband died, she could inherit his property. If a couple got divorced, a woman could keep her own belongings. This was very different from other ancient cultures where women had very few rights. In Egypt, women could go to court and even sue someone if needed. Some women had special jobs. Wealthy women could become priestesses and serve in temples. These women helped with religious ceremonies and cared for statues of the gods. Other women worked as musicians or dancers at festivals. Some were midwives who helped deliver babies. A few were doctors. There is a record of a woman named Pesishe who was called Lady Overseer of Female Physicians. She lived over 4,000 years ago. Girls did not usually go to school unless they were from rich families. Most learned from their mothers. They learned how to cook, sew, and keep a home. Boys were more likely to go to school and learn to read and write. Still, some rich women could read and write, especially if they were from noble families. Women wore simple dresses made of linen. Rich women wore finer clothes and lots of jewelry. They wore necklaces, bracelets, and rings made of gold, beads, or stones. Both men and women wore makeup. They used black paint around their eyes called kohl. It helped protect their eyes from the sun and sand. They also wore perfume and scented oils to smell nice. Some women in ancient Egypt became very powerful. One of the most famous was Hatshepsut. She was a woman who ruled as pharaoh. She wore men's clothing and even a false beard to show she had the same power as a male ruler. She led Egypt during a time of peace and built many temples and statues. Another powerful woman was Cleopatra. She ruled much later and was the last pharaoh of Egypt. She was smart, spoke many languages, and worked hard to protect her kingdom. Cleopatra's alliances with Roman leaders like Julius Caesar and Mark Antony helped secure her power and influence. She was known for her wit, charm, and political acumen, using her relationships with powerful men to maintain Egypt's independence and prosperity. Despite the challenges of her reign, she fiercely fought to protect her kingdom from Roman annexation, ultimately choosing to end her life rather than be paraded as a prisoner by Rome. Another iconic figure in Egyptian history is Nefertiti, the wife of the pharaoh Akhenaten. Together they revolutionized Egyptian religion by worshiping only one god, Aten, and abandoning the traditional polytheistic beliefs. Nefertiti was a powerful queen, often depicted in art and even acting as co-regent with her husband. Her beauty is legendary, symbolized by the famous bust of her that remains one of the most recognized pieces of ancient art. Nefertiti's influence extended beyond her husband's reign, and some historians believe she may have ruled Egypt as pharaoh after his death, although much about her later life remains a mystery. Nefertiti's role in both religion and politics underscores the significant power that some women in ancient Egypt held. Even though most pharaohs were men, goddesses were very important in Egyptian religion. Isis was one of the most loved goddesses. She was known as a caring mother and a powerful protector. Hathor was the goddess of love and joy. Bastet, the cat goddess, protected homes and families. These goddesses showed that women had an important place in both daily life and religion. Women in ancient Egypt were not equal to men in every way, but they had more freedom and respect than in many other ancient places. They worked, owned property, raised families, and sometimes ruled a kingdom. Their stories are still told today, carved into stone walls and written on papyrus scrolls. Imagine living in a land where one person is seen not just as a ruler, but also as a god. That was life in ancient Egypt. That person was the pharaoh. The pharaoh was the king of Egypt, but also much more. He, or sometimes she, was the leader, the protector, the judge, and the religious head of the land. People believed the pharaoh was chosen by the gods to rule on earth. The word pharaoh means great house. At first it was used to talk about the palace itself, but later it came to mean the ruler. The first pharaohs ruled more than 5,000 years ago. A man named Narmer, also called Menes, was one of the first. He united Upper and Lower Egypt into one kingdom. This was the beginning of Egypt's first dynasty. A dynasty is a line of rulers from the same family. The pharaoh had many jobs. He made laws and collected taxes. He led the army and protected Egypt from enemies. He also led religious ceremonies. People believed the pharaoh kept the gods happy. If there was a good harvest, people thanked the pharaoh. If there was a flood or famine, they blamed the pharaoh. Pharaohs were often shown wearing special clothing. They wore crowns with symbols of Egypt, like the cobra and vulture. They carried a crook and a flail, symbols of leadership and power. Statues and paintings showed them as strong and perfect, even if they were not that way in real life. The pharaoh was not just in charge while alive. Egyptians believed the pharaoh became a god after death. That's why they built large tombs for their rulers. These tombs were filled with treasures, food, and even servants for the afterlife. The most famous tombs are the pyramids. The biggest one is the Great Pyramid of Giza. It was built for Pharaoh Khufu around 4,500 years ago. Thousands of workers built it over many years using stone blocks. Over time, pharaohs changed. In the Old Kingdom, they were seen almost like gods. In the Middle Kingdom, they were seen more like good rulers who helped their people. In the New Kingdom, they were great warriors and builders. Some led battles. Others built temples and statues. Some pharaohs became very famous. Hatshepsut was one of the few women who ruled as a pharaoh. She wore a false beard and dressed like a man to show her power. She built great temples and led Egypt in a time of peace and trade. Another famous pharaoh was Akhenaten. He changed Egypt's religion. He said people should worship only one god, the sun god Aten. This was a big change. After he died, most people went back to the old gods. His son was Tutankhamun, or King Tut. He became pharaoh when he was just a boy. He is famous today because his tomb was found almost untouched in 1922. It was full of gold, jewelry, and other treasures. His tomb helped people learn a lot about life in ancient Egypt. One of the most powerful pharaohs was Ramses II, also called Ramses the Great. He ruled for more than 60 years. He fought battles, signed peace treaties, and built huge statues and temples. He had many wives and over 100 children. He lived to be over 90 years old, which was very rare back then. Even though the pharaoh was very powerful, he did not rule alone. He had many helpers. These included priests, scribes, generals, and governors. These people helped run the country. They made sure the farms worked, the taxes were paid, and the temples stayed beautiful. The time of the pharaohs lasted for over 3,000 years. But in the end, Egypt was taken over by other rulers like the Greeks and Romans. Cleopatra was the last pharaoh. She ruled over 2,000 years ago. After her death, Egypt became part of the Roman Empire. Today, the time of the pharaohs is long gone, but their temples, statues, and tombs still stand. People from all over the world visit Egypt to see the pyramids, the Sphinx, and the treasures of King Tut. The pharaohs may be gone, but their stories and their power still amaze us.